Okay, so for numbers 12 through 18, we're going to do the four operations, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing the two functions, f of x and g of x. So I already have number 12 on the screen. So with adding, again, remember you just combine like terms. So I've got 2x and negative x and 5 plus 5. So 2x plus negative x gives me x. Then negative 5 plus 1 gives me negative 4. Okay. They only ask you for the domain of D, so we'll just do that. We'll just answer for the domain of D. For part B, they want, sorry about that. Okay, for part B, we've got to distribute this negative right here with this 1 minus x. So it's going to be 2x minus 5 minus 1 plus x, because a negative times a negative, right? So now I can combine these two, and I get 3x. Combine these two, I get negative 6. For C, I'm going to use distributive property. So I'm going to multiply the 2x with a 1 minus x, and then the negative 5 with a 1 minus x. So 2x, 2x times 1, and then 2x times negative x, and then negative 5 times 1, and then negative 5 times negative x. So now I'm going to have negative 2x squared. I can combine these two, the 2x and the 5x, so that gives me 7x, and then the minus 5. Okay, and then for letter D, well, that's pretty much all you can do, right? You can't simplify it any more than that. You can't factor anything out to reduce it, so this is the answer right here. So all we have to do now is figure out the domain. Well, the domain is all reals except for whatever makes the denominator 0. So in this case, that is 1. So here's a domain. Alright, so 14, again, combine like terms. We're adding the two functions together. So there's only 1x squared, so that one you bring down. There's only 1x, so you bring it over. And then there's a 5 and a negative 9, so then that gives you negative 4. For letter B, don't forget we're going to distribute the negative. So we get 2x plus 5 minus x squared plus 9, because a negative times a negative. And then just write it in standard form. So negative x squared plus 2x, and then the 5 and 9, 14. For letter C, we're multiplying, so distributive property. So it's going to be this times, this times this. So that gives you 2x cubed. Then this times this, minus 18x. This times this, 5x squared. And 5 times negative 9, negative 45. There are no like terms, so all we have to do is put them in standard, put this in standard form. So it's 2x cubed plus 5x squared minus 18x minus 45. And that's the answer for that one. For letter D, again, I can't simplify it anymore. Even if I factor the denominator right here, which is x plus 3x minus 3, it doesn't reduce with anything up here. So I could just leave it as is. So my answer is this. But I could give a domain because that's what they want. So I'll just not equal to, but I'll put an arrow. So the domain is all real numbers except for whatever makes the denominator 0. So it can't be plus or minus 3. Because plus or minus 3 would make the denominator 0. Okay, so now 16 we have a square root function and a rational function. So the only thing we can do here is get a common denominator. So I will, because this is over 1, right? So the common denominator is this one. So I'm going to multiply both, I'll multiply the square root by x squared plus 1 over x squared plus 1. So that'll give me x squared plus 1 times, I'll put parentheses around here, x squared minus 4 plus x squared all over x squared plus 1. So this would be the sum of the function. Now I cannot simplify anything. I cannot combine the x squares because notice right here, it's this times this. So it's not, x squared is not by itself. It's actually connected to this by multiplication. So I cannot combine these two. Okay? So that's as much as we can do. So B is very similar. The only difference is that there is a minus. But notice it's the same process. So I get x squared plus 1 squared minus 4 minus x squared over x squared plus 1. And again, I can't do anything more to simplify this problem. For C, the only thing is just write it as a single fraction instead of having it separate like this. So this becomes, and usually we put the this in front of the radical, so it's going to be x squared minus 4 over x squared plus 1. And again, that's all we can do. Please do not cancel the x squares because there's a 1 here. X squared is not by itself as a factor. It's x squared plus 1. This is a unit. The only way you could cancel this is if we had another x squared plus 1 as a factor up here, and we don't. Okay? It's a factor of the whole thing, because you might say, well, up here it's a factor, right? But there's a minus here that connects these two, this term with this term, so we can't just cancel this and this. Alright? We cannot. So just keep that in mind. This is as much as we can do. For D, okay, so for D, they want the domain, right? I mean, we haven't been answering domain for the ABC, just for the D. So if I look at the numerator, if I look at this, I know that, I'll put it here on the side, that x has to be greater than or equal to 2, or has to be less than or equal to negative 2. Okay, so if I'm thinking of the number line, here's negative 2, here's positive 2. So my domain is in this and this, and in these two intervals. In one of these two intervals, right? I can use any point that's on those two sections, and I'll be fine in the numerator. In the denominator, the only thing I have to watch for is that x not be 0, because if x is 0 down here, then that becomes 0 over 1, which is 0, which is undefined. The good thing, though, is if I look at this interval over here, 0's in between, and it's not even included to begin with. So that's not going to be an issue. So let me just go ahead and simplify D. So remember, when you multiply, when you divide by a fraction, you multiply by the reciprocal. So this is saying, oops, the square root of x squared minus 4 times x squared plus 1 over x squared. So make sure you put parentheses around this, and then usually we write it in the front. Okay, so let me erase this for now. I'll just leave that number line up there. So we usually leave the radical at the end, so I'm just going to rewrite it like this. And again, remember, we cannot cancel these two x squares because there's a plus 1. And the domain is this one. So we could say from negative infinity to negative 2, union 2 to infinity. Oh, actually, there should be, it could be 2 and negative 2, so these should be brackets. Okay? Okay, so here's the setup again for the next set of 4 problems. We're adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing 2 rational functions. So remember, we need a common denominator. And so for a and b, the common denominator is the product of x plus 1 and x cubed. Okay, so that means that we multiply the first one by x cubed, showing x cubed over x cubed. So then that gives me x to the 4th. Okay, and then the second one we multiply by x plus 1, it's probably not going to show well, but x plus 1 over x plus 1. Okay, so times 1, so it's going to give me plus x plus 1, because it's 1 times x plus 1 in the numerator. The denominator, you don't have to multiply the denominator through, you could just leave it in factored form, like that. And so there's nothing to combine in the numerator, so this is the answer. Okay, so in part B, same thing, we're going to multiply this by x cubed over x cubed, and this by x plus 1 over x plus 1, so that we have the same common denominator. So when I do that, I end up with x to the 4th minus, I put parentheses because it's 1 times this. It's a binomial. So minus x plus 1 over x to the 3rd times x plus 1. So I'm going to distribute the negative, so I get x to the 4th minus x minus 1 over x cubed times x plus 1. So here is the final answer. For C, we're multiplying, but remember we can reduce if possible. So I can reduce this x with one of these, and the reason I can cancel those is because this is one of the factors in the denominator. So I factor out an x, so I'm left with 1 in the numerator, so I'm canceling 1 there. And then here, instead of 3 now, I have 2. So it's going to be x plus 1 times x squared. You can leave it like that, or just switch the factors. Okay, and there would be the answer right there. For D, just keep in mind before we simplify anything that let's keep track of the domain. The domain of the numerator of f of x is x cannot equal negative 1. And then in the denominator, right here, 1 over x cubed, x cannot be 0. Okay, so keep that in mind. When we start off this problem, x cannot be negative 1 and x cannot be 0. So we don't have those numbers available to us. So now we're going to divide by multiplying by the reciprocal. So then we have x to the 4th over x plus 1 as our final answer. And even though the final answer only indicates that x cannot be negative 1, remember that in the original function in g of x, x could not be 0. So we didn't have that number in our domain to begin with. So then our domain is all x such that x cannot be negative 1 or 0. Okay, so I'm going to simplify this or evaluate this by doing them individually for this problem, and then I might switch it up for later problems. But for number 20, I'm going to find f of negative 2 and g of negative 2 and see what I get from there. So f of negative 2 means that I'm going to replace the x with a negative 2, so it's negative 2 quantity squared.